So my guest today is a very special friend and colleague that I had the chance to meet when I was in Scotland at the Planetary Health Alliance meeting. He got his medical degree while living in the Philippines and is now a student or a doctorate student at Harvard University. He considers himself a planetary doctor and he's a global leader in energy and sustainability. Give it up for my guest, Mr. Dr. Renzo Guinto. First, I want to thank you for coming on, being the first guest. That means a lot. I'm really excited. I've had a lot of talks with colleagues of mine or students that I'm around, and they're really excited to hear what you have to say just because your experience in the field you've been in. Tell us about yourself a little bit. You give us a brief little description of where you're at, what your journey's been. You don't have to keep it too long because we'll go into everything pretty in depth, I'd like to think.
I don't want to give a Wikipedia style kind of introduction. Well, as you've said in the introduction, I'm from the Philippines. I'm a Filipino physician, but perhaps not your traditional type of, doctor. And I think the times are changing. There's so many things happening in the world, and doctors and even other types of health professionals are starting to realize the need to, step out of the clinic, of the hospital, and really be a doctor for society and even the planet. And that's how I see myself. So that's the kind of doctor I am. And of course, I can talk more about, my roots and my formation, and also my passions and my vision for the
Yeah,
future.
definitely. I like that. And I'm really excited to talk about that transition from medicine to public health because I think that's very interesting. And I know a couple other licensed physicians that did make that transition as well. But talk to me about living in the Philippines because you live in Manila, correct?
An hour away from Manila. That's where I grew up. It's called the city is called Calamba. It's also the birthplace of our national hero. His name
Okay.
is Dr. Jose Rizal, who is also a physician. So it's
Nice.
it's
Okay.
interesting because our national hero is a doctor who once said that we need to treat the social cancer that afflict our people. And during that time, that's colonialism. We were under Spanish rule for more than 300 years. But today you see, the different forms of social cancers and even, planetary cancers that really, affect people's lives, from climate change to, forest degradation to biodiversity loss to ocean pollution.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where I came from. And life in the Philippines, it's a developing country. I talk about it being under the Spanish regime. After that, it was actually a U.S. colony for around 40 years until the end of the World War II. And so if you come here, and I hope, Hunter, you will
I would
be
love
sooner
to.
rather than later. I think the Filipinos will be welcoming you with open arms. You will feel, and experience, the fusion of different cultures,
Mm-hmm.
very strong Catholic heritage as, left by the Spaniards, but also, they even say, the Philippines is like the Hollywood in Asia because of its obsession with everything American.
Mm-hmm.
But times are changing because, we are closer to China, and we see that, the rise of China, with the rise of China, the center of gravity of the global world is moving towards the east, moving
Mm-hmm.
towards Asia. Of course, poverty is still very high in the
Mm-hmm.
country. Inequality is perhaps the most pressing issue.
Mm-hmm.
The haves have and it's very similar to the situation in the U.S., but also in many other developing countries. Those who have, occupy, both positions of power, they have all the resources, while the poor are left behind. And so we still have a long way to go to make sure that there's equity and justice in society. And, you know, I strongly believe that one area where we can achieve that is health, but
Mm-hmm.
also the health sector can be an instrument towards achieving full equity and justice in society.
Yeah, I like
So
that.
that's where I came from, and
Yeah.
I can show to you more pictures of
Yeah,
the
I'd love to see it.
of the country, but also the warmth of the Filipino people. We're known in the world, around the world, for being hospitable, compassionate, and caring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so did any of that, so would you say that the poverty rates there are relatively high compared to that of the United States? Because I'm curious if any of that seeped in or if you were affected by any of that while you lived there, especially growing up as a child, and then that like and how that may affected your journey to getting into medical school at UP
Right,
Manila.
right. Well, poverty, is both described in absolute and relative terms, and a lot of people here still do not get to eat 3 times a day, go to school, even have a shelter when especially when there's rain, if not a typhoon, and the Philippines is
Mm-hmm.
uh, one of the most climate vulnerable countries in the world. We always say we are visited by around 20 typhoons or hurricanes in the U.S., as you call it, every year. Now the number and the intensity are increasing as a result of climate change, and so that's like an additional layer of vulnerability uh, that makes people that puts people in a very difficult position. In addition to the chronic poverty that they're already
Mm-hmm.
suffering from.
Did
Um,
did you experience that at all when you were younger, or have you like while you've lived there?
right. I'm privileged that I didn't get to experience that kind of dire poverty.
Mm-hmm.
There times in our family's life when we have sufficient, we have enough, but you cannot think about other things that you know maybe the middle class or even the upper class take for granted. People think, and later probably we've met in Scotland. I've been to
Yeah.
so many countries, but I only started traveling when I was already 18. And there are young people who travel much earlier because they were, perhaps privileged with resources. I didn't have that when I was a young kid. Our resources are only for the needs and not for the wants, right?
Mm-hmm.
But of course, that's a totally, the plight of the poor is definitely much, more severe than the story that I'm sharing with you, and
Yeah.
that's why I'm very grateful.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I feel a sense of obligation, especially as an educated person, to give back, but also to find ways to uplift our fellow people, our fellow men, from the poverty where they're in. I'm using my profession, which is the profession of medicine, but also public health, to find solutions to that chronic poverty that has dominated in our society for more than a century.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's an amazing outlook, and I think you're the right person to be in that position. So that's amazing. Yeah, so you got your medical degree from UP Manila, correct?
University of the Philippines, so
Yep.
that's a national university, public university of the
Nice.
country.
So, how far did you get in that process? So, did you do, because I researched a little bit what it takes to actually get to be a licensed physician. Did you do a residency? Did you go through all that process? Or did you go to public health before that?
Right. So, I didn't go to residency and I don't have any plans anymore. Before I was thinking, oh, maybe I should be an internist or, a family medicine physician or even a pediatrician. But, early in my med school, and by the way, I was a reluctant medical student. So I think, maybe you're still considering to enter med school someday, but I never planned to be a medical doctor. I just was privileged to be invited to a special program, which is a more accelerated version of, the medical education here in the Philippines. Our medical education is patterned after that of the United States. So we have 9 years of training,
Oh,
4 years
wow.
pre-med, 5 years, medical proper. I only did it for 7 instead of 9. But then on my I think it was around second year or third year of med school when I encountered the field of public health. And it was love at first sight. And since then, I've never, I've been faithful to public health.
Mm-hmm.
I've been devoted to it to the point that even before graduating, I already knew, um, you know, to myself, within myself, that I will not pursue any more clinical practice, but really step out of the hospital and deal with the more upstream determinants of health. The health
Mm-hmm.
system, the environment,
Yeah.
social factors, and that is what the field of public health is all about. So. And I learned public health initially by doing. I didn't get a master's right away. I didn't take kind of a formal kind of education until 4 years after I've been doing it. I realized I need to get some form of certification or authorization that I am a public health physician. And it was a blessing that I got accepted at
Yeah, that's
Harvard.
amazing. So, yeah, before we dive into that transition, because I am really interested in that, we have a lot of medical students that are most likely going to be watching this.
Right.
So, do you have any advice or suggestions for people that are about to enter into the medical school, those first couple years, that process, that grind?
Right. Right. Well, I will not give the traditional advice, that people say, oh, you have to study more, read your books, which many students don't really do because, they also do clinical work. There's just so many things that need to be done. But, my advice, and I think this is something perhaps that I experienced uniquely, and I've seen that, benefited me and my career and my life a lot, is that, you know, during your med school days, and it might be so overwhelming. There's so many assignments, so much knowledge that need to be absorbed, and stress in the clinics and in the wards. You know Still find ways and opportunities to nurture your other passions and talents. You are in medical school not just to become a technician,
Mm-hmm.
because robots are going to assume some of the functions that we're already doing in the field of medicine, from radiology to you know um, physical examination even. But there are things that we can learn from outside of med school that eventually will benefit your future practice, our future practice, whether you're interested in politics or interested in the humanities, arts, communication. You love reaching out to the community, or you're passionate about the environment. Make sure you find time to diversify your activities, to just to make your medical school days you're rich, or richer
Mm-hmm.
than what traditional medical education would do to your life. And you will reap the benefits once you're in the field of practice, because you'll be a much more holistic, much more informed physician, engaged not just in the hospital but in the broader society.
Nice. I like that. I like that a lot. So, probably my biggest question for you, the thing that's really been getting at me. So you go
You
to
ask
medical
what.
school. So you go to medical school for this
Right.
extremely long period of time. You're about to be in a job with so much security, and as far as whether it be passion, caring for people, and then just monetary value alone. How did you take that leap of faith to public health? How did you leave that behind, that security, and go to that different field that may not be as proclaimed as that would maybe not give you as much security?
Right, right. And unfortunately, I mean, we know how important public health is. In fact, we can argue that public health has saved more lives than clinical medicine. And there are studies that have, even attempted to, estimate the share, in terms of, proportion of clinical medicine and broader public health interventions. I'll not go into detail on that subject, but we also know that, unfortunately, despite the importance of public health still, does not enjoy the stature, for example, of clinical medicine. Unfortunately, some public health practitioners are seen as like maybe second-class citizens in the health sector, because you have glamorized and romanticized, the image of a doctor. You should be like Dr. House, or that bug in the muscle using, whatever technique you have. So that's one. But also, there's a challenge when it comes to public health jobs. They're seen as less lucrative, and also, not so much available, or pretty limited in some settings. But I'm optimistic that there will be a growth of public health opportunities as public health problems become more, widespread and complex. Those are some of the concerns. But I think in my life, or in my journey, what happened was that my passion for public health was solidified early on. As I've said, even before leaving med school, I already knew that I'm going to pursue a lifelong career in public health. But also, it was not an easy, journey, in a sense that, after you leave med school, there's no ready job waiting for you. You're a public health.
Yeah, that's what really gets at me. That's what I find so interesting.
Right. And so, this is where your connections and networks will come in. It's also important to have a broad view of public health, so you can assume many different roles, whether you are into health communications, or you're doing outbreak investigation, or program management and implementation. So there's so many things that can be done. And so I think one advice is not to silo yourself early on, but rather explore and, just be, like water, just flow where the opportunity is, where the hole is, but also like a sponge, learn as much as you can, and then later, develop your expertise on a particular subject matter or particular discipline. From what I just said, there are many lessons that can be drawn from,
Definitely.
Being a risk taker, just being open and, flexible and, versatile, and also, have a passion and love for learning.
Definitely.
Because, at the end of the day, you might not need any formal education, especially in this day and age when, higher education, the role of universities are being questioned, especially in your country, in the U.S.
Oh, yes. It's getting real serious.
Education is going down, and CEOs are, hiring people who do not have degrees at all, and the Gates and the Zuckerbergs, become billionaires without finishing their degree for my alma mater.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely incredible. And that's something I really, really touch on so much, whether it be conversations with other professors or students. Just the ability to learn over the internet is so amazing. And I, from what I can tell, and people that are actually looking at this long term, a lot of people do suspect, especially here in the U.S., that small universities like the one I'm at are going to be closing down, just because the expenses really don't pay for what it's worth, because you have people getting hired without degrees, and it's no longer necessary as long as you have that portfolio to show that you have the skills, whatever that may be. But yeah, I really like that leap of faith. I think that's amazing, just following your passion. I think that's inspiring. And I also see value in that jump from the perspective of just the amount of people that you're able to have an effect on. Going from a physician where you are working with one single patient and then jumping to public health where you're going to have a countrywide effect. I look at that as a huge value, just the spread of how your efforts are translated.
But it can also be frustrating because the effect is not immediate. In clinical medicine, you're doing a technician's job, and once you've closed the hole or, fixed the wound or sutured the wound or, stopped, a particular symptom, then the patient feels better immediately.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like that perspective a lot. That kind of tames what I was saying there about effect. That instant gratification is a big effect, and the quality of the effect you're having, right? I mean, especially with a direct care with a patient, the quality of that interaction might be not only like more instantly gratifying, but also your efforts might translate more to results. So that's very interesting. So you go from medicine to public health, and you apply to Harvard from the Philippines, probably one of the most predominant schools in the world. And
Right.
how was that process for you applying, getting in? Because the perspective around here, especially at this university and others alike that I've been to, if you've been to Harvard, you just have a big like sign that hangs over your head that just says like genius. You know what I mean? That had to be an amazing feeling for you to get in.
Right. Well, if you think that way and you're a Harvard student, that big sign means ego. And so,
Yeah,
you know,
definitely.
and I'm not sure if you've seen that article. I think it was in the New York Times, the H bomb, like Harvard alumni actually don't want to say that they're from Harvard because it elicits or evokes, different, mixed
Yeah,
feelings.
I can see that.
People, you know, in general are welcoming. They know the prestige of being in, and here I'm not being humble here, the world's best university, but but also, they value or appreciate, what you can offer because they have an idea of what Harvard education means and what kinds of students, it produces, but also the sense of obligation, that, and from the Bible, to whom much is given, much is, required. And, to be one of the very few Filipinos who make it to Cambridge and receive that kind of education is not just a blessing, but really a privilege which entails a high level of obligation, to transmit and translate the knowledge into something that will uplift people's lives. Not too many people know, and I'll say it here for the first time. This is the second time I applied to that program. The first time they rejected me, and that's okay.
Yeah, definitely.
I was rejected. I wasn't accepted. And that was, I didn't take it as if I failed, I took it as a reminder and a message that, I need to spend more time here in the Philippines to deepen my anchor, deepen my roots. So I get to really understand the situation. And so when I go to Harvard, I have a better understanding of my context, of the situation, and I can process that with the new knowledge that I will be acquiring from the university in order for me to apply those lessons when I return home. So that kind of arc was etched on my mind. Like, okay, I'm not, I'll be going to Harvard with a much richer experience to share also to my classmates, right? Mm-hmm. But I think one advice that I can give to those who would like to pursue, advanced degrees in their dream schools, not necessarily Harvard, is to really gain experience first, because it will be reflected in every piece that you submit, from your cover letter to your recommendation letter to your curriculum vitae and so many other stuff. The breadth of your experience will be reflected in all those components of the application kit. yeah, that's
Yeah, I like that a lot, and I mean, that's truly amazing that you getting into that university. I'm sure, like you said, that was a emotional experience and very rewarding. I know for a lot of people, getting into that dream school, making that happen is a big deal, and it can provide a good weight off the shoulders. But that's very interesting that you talk about the pressure that it puts on you, and that's something I don't think a lot of people think about, especially attending a university of that stature. But one question I have, so the life, when people think of Harvard, they think of everybody is walking from classroom to classroom with books in their hands, reading, just consuming information all the time. And I think it's so important with the people you surround you with, and how they pressure you to do certain things. How was the environment like on that campus or at that university? Did it push you? Did you feel pressured to kind of push the limits or go maybe achieve more than you had at a different, like at UP Manila?
my experience in Harvard is, different in the sense that, it exposed me to really advanced ideas, and we know that Harvard, as well as other big universities, big research universities in the U.S., are the birthplace of, really big ideas in the cutting edge,
Mm-hmm.
technology, innovation, etc. So you get to meet a lot of amazing people from around the world. I am part of a class of 21 people from many different countries, all of them with bringing rich experiences from their different, previous backgrounds and professions, from different disciplines.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, it sounds a lot like were already in that mindset though. You already had the Harvard mindset before you got there, so maybe you didn't feel those pressures, especially with the outlook you had on when you attended UP Manila, being that voice or that face that could change things for your country, be that spokesperson. When you look at Harvard or when you think of universities like Oxford or Harvard, I feel a lot of people, that first image that comes to mind is someone that is just reading all the time, is always consuming information. You know what I mean? So I'm glad you humbled me there with that idea.
There are people who do that, and I would not, fault them for choosing to do
Yeah,
that.
no, that's amazing, I think.
Right, right. But I'm intrigued by your university, and so hopefully in the future I'll be able to visit your institution as well, and maybe find ways to collaborate, whether from my Harvard hat or my Philippine hat. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure you know there's a lot of synergies that can be harnessed.
Yeah, I think that would be amazing. I think that'd be amazing. So yeah, let's switch gears from, so we know you're in public health. You went to Harvard. Now what are you doing? Where are you at now? Why did you move back to the Philippines? Are you going back home to use that knowledge you've gained here to make that difference that you were talking about when you're
Right.
that you
I,
saw when you were younger?
I haven't graduated yet. I'm targeting to graduate in May, so let's keep our fingers crossed.
Me too.
But
Me too. I'm in
not
the same
just
boat.
our fingers crossed, but for me to, be more disciplined and to really, finish this last leg, and continue writing my dissertation. And that's the reason why I'm in the Philippines. I decided to come back. I decided that if I'm going to write a 100 or 150 page dissertation, might as well write something, about my country, that studies my country, that puts my country in the map of
Hmm.
global health, and that is useful for the country. And I'm looking at, you know, whether our health systems, especially in the developing world, and using the Philippines as an example, if these health systems are ready to address these challenges, health challenges that climate change will be bringing. I'm investigating this concept called climate smart health system. So, what is a climate smart health system? What are its features? And how do we get to being climate smart? How we can transition health systems from being climate dumb to climate smart. So I'm
Okay.
trying to answer those questions, and I'm looking at several municipalities here in the Philippines to find the answers. For sure, I will not find all the answers, but at least we will have some, indications, some initial lessons for future implementation and scale up, not just within the Philippines, but in many other countries. I think we need to start accelerating the pace of action, and not just in the area of research. I think we need more translation and implementation to happen, and innovation even. Making sure that health is protected in the world of climate instability. And the Philippines, as I've said, one of the most vulnerable countries in the world to climate change, natural disasters, is a good place to start. But there's so many different countries in the world that are even already experiencing the effects of climate change and other global environmental challenges that ultimately impact on human health. So that's my thesis, but also I'm now talking about, like, what is this bigger cause that I'm bringing and advocating for?
Yeah. So climate smart healthcare versus dumb or climate dumb healthcare.
I
However
just
you
coined
worded that.
now, not a climate dump thing,
Yeah.
right?
So how? Yeah. Can you just?
That in my write-up.
So how can you how would you describe a climate smart
Right.
healthcare system? What does that entail? What does that mean?
Right, right. And one idea is not original because it's already used by other sectors. That's one, and the health sector is somehow a newcomer slash a laggard in the campaign or the movement towards being a climate smart society. But also the World Bank in 2017 launched this idea of a climate smart healthcare system. So they put it on the table as a vision for the future of health systems. And basically the technical definition of a climate smart, whether it's a health system or climate smart agriculture or climate smart even banking, it means that your system is able to first mitigate climate change or contribute to mitigation, which means lowering greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah.
Secondly, the system is also able to adapt. So adaptation, meaning you're able to, respond, to the shocks and stresses that climate change brings. Okay. So a climate smart health system should be able to mitigate and adapt.
Yeah.
And it's easier said than done.
So are you saying that our healthcare systems right now, considering that most are probably considered dumb since a lot of us haven't really made that transition yet,
right,
when reacting to climate change scenarios, disasters, whatever these may be, that they're too concrete to be able to bounce back or respond to those correctly or efficiently?
Yeah, I mean, there are efforts already happening, and unfortunately, these efforts are, tend to be, small scale, tend to be, pilot projects. I hate the word pilot because pilot projects never get scaled up, never get repeated. Mm-hmm. And what we want is climate and health activities, do not remain as, silos in, the public health or the health system. Rather, it becomes part of the DNA of the health system.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. I like that. So so this is very close to that topic of planetary health that we met about at Scotland. So we've been talking about this and we've alluded to this a couple times during this conversation, but I had the pleasure of actually working with Dr. Guinto here while we were in Scotland. We facilitated a discussion with the Emerging Scholars Network, and that's where I met him, and that's what led to this. We actually prolonged conversation after that. I actually almost dropped out of college to join your efforts and your universal healthcare business plan. But with that being said, let's talk about the topic of planetary health in general, because I think that's very interesting and new and very unique to some people.
Yeah, I mean, so planetary health is a new concept. It's being described as a new discipline, a new field of inquiry, an arena for action that basically looks at not just the health of people, but also the health of the planet that in the first place sustains our health. So you see, the connection. It's somehow a reaction to the older field of public health, which I've been talking about
Mhm.
a lot. And it's an exciting field which requires a lot of transdisciplinary work. So, when we were in Scotland, it's not anymore just the doctors being in the room, but really even veterinarians and ecologists and sociologists and entrepreneurs and, so many different people. Because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, if we want to address global, planetary health issues like climate change or ocean acidification or biodiversity loss or land use change or rapid urbanization or population migration, all these issues will require, the confluence of so many different, disciplines, perspectives, ways of thinking. And I'm sure you, Hunter, as well, are inviting our young, especially our young millennial listeners, to explore this new field because, now more than ever, we need, more minds and hands and, brilliant, next generation leaders and scholars and practitioners to really push the frontiers and advance this field, forward.
Yeah, that's been pretty much the staple of my undergraduate career. And we'll actually post a link to the Planetary Health Alliance website below the video, just so you guys, if you want more information, you guys can check that out. But yeah, that provides the framework for the organization I started here on campus, HBHS.
Yeah.
And just provides that baseline education while trying to make those changes at a relative small level on just our campus and our community. But yeah, it's been an amazing process, and the interdisciplinary factor about it is truly amazing. And that's something that we emphasize more than anything, because when people try to approach these environmental issues, a lot of people that aren't in environmental subjects are fearful or not as confident as they should be, especially when we're talking about such a widespreading general umbrella topic like planetary health.
Right. I mean, you mentioned about its interdisciplinary nature, and and I always believe that innovations, the bright, brilliant ideas, world-changing ideas, are born when more than one discipline or many disciplines collide. It's like when two stars, bump into each other, and I forgot my astronomy already, but there's some new form of star that
Yeah.
comes out of it. And it's the same thing with knowledge, with the convergence of many different bodies of knowledge.
That statement you just made took me. I got a flashback to when we were sitting at that conference, and we were sitting there, and we were talking about how there's not enough scientists here. We need more entrepreneurs. And I remember just being invigorated with the drive to go into entrepreneurship. But I think it's very true. There is a lot of discussion and not a lot of, and you touched on this earlier, not as much action as there could be potentially if we went in that direction. But yeah, talking about the interdisciplinary factor, I think that's one of the most beautiful things about planetary health in general, because in discussions with other fields, a lot of the time you're really not allowed to step out of your lane. And when you do, sometimes you can be shut down. And I think that's a benefit that happens when you do create a field like this in the 20th century, or the 21st century. So I guess to end it off, we talked about millennials a little bit earlier, but what is their role? What are the young people listening to go check out the PHA website after this?
Millennials too.
Yeah, exactly. What is the
Well,
role for especially for that kid that says, I'm just one person, how can I not make it? I'm not going to be able to make a difference. I'm such a small part of this big field. And a lot of people get bogged down by what's going on in the United States, all this fight against this effort and this mindset. It's like, well, I can't make that difference. And I get that a lot, and I think it's a very interesting topic to end this on.
right. Well, you know, most people will say, that the beginning of action is awareness, and I do agree with that. And so, if you as a young person, you feel hopeless, you feel that you don't have the capacity to affect change, it's important to first be aware of your surroundings, the issues, have that passion for learning that I was talking about a while ago. is, necessary but not sufficient.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many people, young people, fellow young professionals who are aware of these issues and they're not doing anything about it.
Yeah.
They're perhaps being complacent, feeling a bit powerless, not having able to identify opportunities where they can address these issues and unleash their talents and energies. So my second advice is, not just to be aware, but also to keep being inspired. And there's so many ways, to be inspired, being connected and surrounded by equally inspiring people.
Yeah, that is a big one.
Yeah, and like, Hunter, the two of us, and other colleagues that we've met during the Planetary Health Conference in Scotland, just being part of this, network is so vital in, keeping the momentum alive. This hunger for knowledge and discovery and problem solving. Maybe you draw your inspiration from your family or your community, your friends, your colleagues, or maybe from an activity that you always. So there's so many ways to be inspired, but the important thing is to just keep motivated, so that your awareness can transform into action. Related to what I said about being surrounded, by equally hearted and like-minded people, it's important to be, part of these networks, to be part of a team, because the world's problems cannot be solved by any single person, right? But Margaret Mead, the anthropologist, said, that a small group of people can change the world. And time and time again, if you look back in history, the big problems are never solved by an individual. Even the Nobel Prize winners who discovered this and that are supported by a lab, of a team of scientists and mentees and proteges. It's important also to have some projects happening, whether it's a small one, maybe you started a Facebook page, raising awareness about a topic that you feel passionate about, or every weekend you volunteer with an organization that serves underserved communities that are affected by topics or issues that you feel concerned about. So just having something happening will also keep you motivated and driven. If you notice, I'm not really emphasizing you have to have a big idea, you have to have a grand project. Because I think change happens in ways big and small, and we always underestimate the power of small changes and small acts and small deeds. If everyone just thinks that way, then all the small deeds will turn into a grand humanity project.
Right? No, I absolutely agree.
And transformation.
I think a big thing too, to kind of jump off that a little bit, is that a lot of people don't realize how something even as small as a Facebook page or just a little project you start, how that energy, how that work can kind of dissipate through your social groups, to your friends and your friends' friends, just taking that action. And even though it might seem like a small little project or a small thing, that it can like a drop in a pool. It can dissipate out like waves and have an effect on your surrounding bodies, those surrounding bodies, and so on.
Right. Well, another thing that I thought of is we need to start changing our mental model. And oftentimes our mental models are characterized by ideas like, oh, I can't do it, or, the problem is so big, or, and I am too small, or, and always being, pessimistic about things. I think we need to start, changing that, so that, we can move forward and we can, really turn our ideas into actions, whether they're big or small. And I strongly believe in the power of young people. The innate creativity and energy and spirit of innovation. And that needs to be unlocked. And we're seeing some of that already in many different parts of the world. In the likes of Hunter creating this, kind of platform from his own initiative, and I hope that many more young people will, again, change the mental model from I can't do it to I can solve the problems and I can change the world, and start projects like this,
Yeah.
big, small, they all make a difference.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the internet provides so much, not only information, but reach for all of us. And I do think that that's something that's going to slowly be realized and taken advantage of over the generations. And hopefully we can just take care of it right now with ours. But I think that's a great place to stop. Renzo, before we leave, do you have anything you want to plug? Do you have any, like a website? What's your Instagram, Twitter?
Oh, right. Well, and follow me on Twitter, at Renzo Guinto. Sure, Instagram as well. I'm very boring. I just use my name in all my social platforms. If you want to learn more about the things that I work on, and for instance, you are interested in a particular subject, you want to collaborate with me, visit my Harvard website. You just Google Renzo Guinto Harvard. That's the first website that will show up. And there's a contact form there, which you can use to reach me, or you can also tweet me. And I'm happy to have conversations with anyone from around the world, as long as you're passionate to change the world. And I'm happy to have these kinds of conversations, and hopefully we will be closer to the finish line. Although I think a big problem ends within one generation and new problems arise. So that's like the natural trajectory of history. But I think, and I believe, and I hope that with the efforts, with the small acts and big acts of the millennial generation, we're the most informed generation. We're a very critical, a generation of critical thinkers. We're well traveled. We've seen the world. We're very exposed. But we also have very strong notions of justice and universality. And so I am very excited about the future, despite the bleakness of what climate projections do show us. That by this year we will be extinct already. Whatever. I think there's hope, and we should continue clinging to it.
Yep, I agree. I don't follow the gloom and doom scenarios too much. But with that being said, Renzo, thank you so much for coming on, man. I appreciate it. Definitely have to do it again soon. Maybe I'll probably be in a different place. I'll probably have a new studio next time this happens. I'm going to be moving.
Or live recording here in the Philippines.
There you go.
And, show our, mountains and our, seas and, everything else in between.
I have to. I wonder how difficult it is to get all this through airport security.
We'll figure that out.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. Well, thank you guys all for watching. We're going to put all these links in the bio. The links to his social media accounts, the PHA website for anybody that wants to get more information on the topics we're talking about. And thank you guys so much for watching.